begun. Our town attorney is online.
Board of Appeals public hearing. Today is April 12th, 2023. It is 7 p.m. We will be hearing, oh, I'm sorry, my microphone is off. Maybe not. It's off. Sorry, I'm a little technical. And there it goes. All right. So anyway, we're here for two cases today. One is the continuation of case number BOA 000-629-2002 Grange Subdivision. And then the second is BOA 000-650-2023, the Oriole Lane project. The way this will work is there's a sign-in sheet. I see a lot of people in the gallery today. If anybody wants to speak who is not an applicant, please make sure you've signed in. I believe there may be some online as well. We will allow members of the public to make statements at the end of each presentation relating to whichever project they are here to speak about. I will call the registered speakers to the podium. Speakers who have registered to speak in advance via the town webpage will be recognized prior to folks who just signed up today. I may limit, depending on how busy things go, maybe limited to 3 minutes each. And any written documents for the record submitted in advance of the public hearing are provided to me and the other members of the board prior to the opening of the public hearing. So I'm going to call to order or actually, I guess, Madam Clerk, we're going to call to order the first case, which is BOA 000-629-2022 Grange Subdivision.
Mr. Chair, if I may, we have not approved the minutes from the last meeting.
Oh, I'm sorry. I'm following your outline. So let me. Oh, I guess second on the list is Pledge of Allegiance. So we can everybody stand, if you wish. Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. All right. Next, we will approve the minutes of the previous meeting. That was January 11th, 2023. Have the members of the board had the opportunity to review the minutes from the last hearing?
Yes, motion to approve.
Seconded. All in favor? Aye. Thank you. Okay. So I have already reviewed the procedures of the public hearing. We will then move on to the continuation of public hearing BOA 000-629-2002 Grange Subdivision. And I'll reopen the public hearing as just note for the record, this case was continued after January 11th, 2023 hearing for the applicant to provide documentation and testimony relative to traffic impacts of the request. I will start then with Ms. Harrington from the Planning Department with regard to the traffic issue. Well, yes, I guess we should. It was the because this was a continuation, was the hearing republished for today's date? Okay. And it was previously, we went over on the record on January 11th that the previous hearing had been, the public notice procedures had been followed. Is that correct? Okay. And we have in the record the clerk's affidavit, certificate of publication, and et cetera, affidavit of sign posting. And Madam Clerk, do we have those on the screen by any chance?
No, Mr. Chair, I can read the statement for the record.
Please do.
For the record, this public hearing was advertised in the Southern Maryland newspaper in the March 17th, 2023 issue as reflected on the certificate of publication attached to the meeting agenda. As indicated in the clerk's affidavit, letters were sent to owners of all properties contiguous to and opposite the property by certified mail, and a sign was posted visible from Port Tobacco Road and adjoining public right-of-way. Notice of this public hearing was also advertised on the town website.
Thank you, Madam Clerk. All right, now we will proceed to the staff presentation by Director Harrington. Thank you.
Good evening. For the record, Janine Harrington, Director of Planning for the Town of Oplata. So just as a overview, this is for Cross Lane Construction LLC applying for a special exception to develop 24.984 acres in the R21 zoning district to allow for a senior living community in accordance with the town code, section 191-10, use number 7, and such special provisions as listed in section 191-52.h.28. So I won't go over all of the details since this is the continuation, but the case was continued from the January 11th meeting to provide additional information in accordance with section 191-52.f and G, I believe. And the applicant has submitted a revised statement of justification, which is attached to the agenda, which explains further in detail on some of those that have been that were left out. So for section 191-52.f, the reference document, special exception site plan, staff has reviewed the special exception application and site plan and found that the tax map and detailed site plan have been provided in accordance with this section. And it was in particular section 191-52.g that the continuance was continued on. And staff has reviewed their revised special exception statement of justification, and that does outline all of the requirements as dictated in that section. As noted, a lot of the items they state within their justification are not applicable, and they did go ahead and use the Charles County adequate public facilities ordinance to determine that a traffic impact analysis or study would not be warranted due to the number of trips. With that, staff's recommendation is still to recommend approval for the construction of the senior living community with the condition of prior to the approval of a preliminary plat for the subject project, Cross Lane Construction LLC shall work in good faith with the town of Oplata, Maryland Department of Transportation, Charles County Department of Planning and Growth Management, and other subdivisions in the southwest quadrant to assess the traffic cumulative impacts of projects in the southwest quadrant, develop a plan to address operational concerns in the southwest quadrant, including roadway approaches from other quadrants insofar as they may be affected, and agree on equitable distribution of costs, including participation by public agencies and developers. With that, I'll conclude the staff presentation. If you have any questions, please let me know.
Thank you. So the applicants have So we continued this case or this application because our statute, which is section 191-52G 1D, has a list of several factors that must be shown in order for the board to grant a special exception. G1 says the Board of Appeals shall not grant any special exception unless it finds from the evidence of record that, and then D5 is that the proposed use of the location will not constitute a nuisance because of noise, traffic, number of people, or type of physical activity. We specifically continued this matter because we were concerned about traffic as well as overburdening existing and planned public facilities, which would include water and sewer, which is 191-52G1D1. And they have determined that because of the public use facilities regulations don't require a traffic study, that one is not going to be done. Is that correct?
Correct.
So we have no additional information whether or not this will create a nuisance based on traffic. Sorry, we'll get there.
Their statement and justification explains that because the warrant analysis did not show that they needed to do a traffic impact study, that it would not be a nuisance. So under their revised justification statement, they do outline and address every single one of those points.
Okay, so I guess then what we'll do is move on to the applicant, and now please come forward and
Good evening, Mr. Chair, members of the Board of Appeals. For the
Welcome back.
record, my name is Nate Foreman, and I'm an attorney with O'Malley, Miles, Nyland, and Gilmore. And I'm here on behalf of the applicant in this case, Cross Lane Construction. I have with me this evening on behalf of our applicant, the Cross Lane, Mr. Mike Taylor and Adam Engel. I have Mr. Nick Dribbin on behalf of Lenhart Traffic, who helped us do the traffic study and do the trip counts for this case. And finally, Amy Summer, who was our civil engineer with Charles P. Johnson and Associates. One thing I do want to say just preliminarily, this statement of justification that's shown on the screen, I think it's the outdated one. Just, I don't know if that's important or not, but I think that's not the one we had to submit that was revised, because the newer one actually is up to 15 pages, just for the record.
okay.
We have prepared a slideshow to talk more in detail about some of the findings and statements we had made in this the statement of justification that was submitted. So if it's with the board's pleasure, I'd like to go through that presentation.
Certainly.
Okay, great. So we did kind of just use the skeleton of the previous presentation, but we've kind of modified it to address the specific concerns that the board had raised at the previous hearing. Next slide, please. Again, this just shows the location of this site is in the general context of the town of La Plata. Next slide, please. This is the more specific showing the zoomed in portion and the actual layout and configuration of the site. Next slide, please. This is again an overview of the project. I'm not going to belabor it too much, but as you know, it's a single family, it's a senior living community with 52 single family detached units. They're all going to be one level with a 2-car garage, which is very conducive to single level living, which we believe is very important for the seniors in the area and to attract and retain seniors in La Plata overall. Next slide, please. So here's kind of where we go into the specific findings that were required for a special exception. The first finding about a special exception is the proposed use does not violate or adversely affect the town of La Plata comprehensive plan, this chapter, or any applicable law. The town of La Plata comprehensive plan denotes the subject property as low density residential. And low density residential generally equates to about 2 to 3 dwelling units an acre. We are at 2.08 dwelling units an acre, so very much in that range. Moreover, the comprehensive plan promulgates specific goals for the town as part of its implementation. Goal 24 is to encourage a range of housing density, type, cost, and size in new subdivisions to welcome a diverse population. Goal 25 is to support aging in place initiatives to attract and retain La Plata's senior citizens. This is a very unique type of housing unit that we're proposing. We think it's conducive not only to the neighborhood in general, but it's also for the residents that it's seeking to attract. So we believe for these reasons, we are meeting these goals in the comprehensive plan. Next slide, please. The tract shall be suitable for the development proposed. Suitability of the tract shall be determined by reference to the La Plata comprehensive plan, size, topography, and other physical features of the tract. Accessibility of the tract to services and facilities required by the use, and other information as reasonably necessary. As Ms. Harrington said in her staff report, we're about 25 acres, and this is a sufficient size to accommodate the proposed number of dwelling units, the setbacks, the landscaping, the roadway improvements within the subdivision, stormwater management facilities, and all the while without impacting the environmentally sensitive areas at the southern end of the property. We've talked about the La Plata comprehensive plan and how we're meeting it already. Regarding size and topography and layout. The site does kind of have a grade decrease from the roadway towards the rear of it, which is where there's a stream. And because of natural hydrology, that's also where we are proposing to install our stormwater management facilities. So we're using the natural layout of the property to help manage and control the rainwater that's on the property and will be when this is hopefully approved. Again, also there's in regards of open space and preservation or conservation, about 13.1 acres of the site, or 52%, will be open space. It will be not taken over by homes or roadway or impervious surface. And of those 13 acres, 13.1, 5.94 acres of woodland is going to be retained, with an additional 1.97 acres of reforestation. So we are doing a lot to maintain the environment and the greenery of the site, even with this development. Regarding the services and facilities, I believe this to mean sort of the services and facilities that are there to accommodate the seniors, and whether they will have access to emergency facilities, doctors, retail, shopping, sort of everyday life, because I'm not sure what other, as a general matter, what would the senior living community need in terms of services? It's the residents inside of it. The La Plata Volunteer Fire Department is about 2 miles away. They have several apparatus to help. They have 3 engines, 1 truck, 1 foam tanker, 1 collapse unit, and various smaller vehicles with water suppression capabilities. Charles County Rescue Squad 51 is 1 mile away, and it has 3 ambulances. The University of Maryland Charles Regional Medical Center is 1.3 miles away. I was not able to get figures as to their capacity and their apparatus. And finally, the La Plata Police Department is 1 mile away, and similar to the Regional Medical Center, I don't think they go about advertising how many police cars and that they have available. Regard the services for the seniors, they're in very close proximity to the La Plata Shopping Center, which has a hardware store, Dollar Tree, and several restaurants, including a Popeyes, a KFC, and an Outback Steakhouse. And this is not to mention the myriad of other uses up and down US 301 that the seniors can partake in. And I believe there had been a Sonic, and it's now a Panda Express just on the south side. Google Maps almost did me wrong there. It's Google Street View because it still shows the Sonic. There are professional offices that are close along Centennial Street and St. Mary's that have a lot of, accountants, doctors, medical professionals to help with the seniors' needs in those sort of professional capacities. Next slide, please. The proposed use will satisfy all use standards for the use set forth in subsection H per Ms. Janine Harrington's memo dated April 12th, staff report dated April 12th, 2023. Our development conforms with all the use standards that are set forth in subsection H, which you can see in the staff report. Next slide, please. The proposed use at this location will not, 1, adversely affect the health and safety of residents or workers in the area. I have broken this section down into non-transportation related issues and transportation related issues. So don't worry, I will cover the transportation. But I did want to start off by just saying how, this proposed senior living community is going to develop with high quality senior housing that is close and convenient to the downtown core of La Plata, which we hope will not only attract citizens from around, across the Charles County and maybe Southern Maryland or beyond, but also for residents already living in the area to have a type of home that can downsize while staying within the town. Yeah, so and it's actually very interesting when notice of this hearing was posted. We actually received, I think, at least 2 calls from residents who saw the sign, wondering how much they could pay for, how much these houses were going for, and what the move-in date would be. So I'm not sure I've ever seen notice where people are actually already thinking it's developed and they want to move in. So I think that shows the type of demand that this use is satisfying or trying to satisfy. There's no impact on schools. And there is, we are proposing a density and type of dwelling unit that is similar to the adjoining or residential subdivisions and sort of the other residential uses in the R21 zone, which is sort of around the property. Next slide, please. So now we're going to kind of talk about how it's going to, how transportation plays a role into this. And I do want to kind of begin by putting this in the context of what Maryland courts have said about special exceptions, and that, you know, some amount of impact from traffic is anticipated and expected from a development. Trips cannot be wholly avoided, nor are they expected to be. The question when approving a special exception is whether the trips that are generated from this use, from this particular use at this particular location, would be above and beyond those normally associated with this use, irrespective of the zone. And applicants are not required to do a comparative analysis of the adverse effects of a proposed use at a particular location to find out if it's suited somewhere else or whether it's better there. It's just, what about this site? Are there any facts, probative facts, that would show that at this site there was any particular issue with the type of community in regards to the adjoining development or the use of enjoyment by adjoining or neighboring parcels? And if there was no probative evidence, then denial of the special exception would be arbitrary, capricious, and illegal. Turning to the actual traffic trips counts that we had done, there is proposed to be 24 a.m. and 27 peak hour daily trips proposed for about 340 daily trips. Charles County does not require a traffic impact study when the trip count is below 35 peak hour trips, nor does the state require a traffic impact study when the anticipated trips are below 50. This basically shows that when you are proposing such a limited number of trips, Charles County and the state don't consider it worthwhile to studying it because it doesn't impact the existing facilities. The existing facilities can handle such a de minimis addition to the existing use or to the existing roadways. And when you look at what we are actually proposing here, I know as to what could be developed at this site, we just have to look at the 2007 subdivision plan for a trip analysis. When if that subdivision were to be approved now, with the 40 non-age restricted dwelling units, 12 less units than what we are proposing, it would generate 32 a.m. peak hour trips and 42 p.m. peak hour trips, thereby, and 434 daily trips, thereby triggering the need for a traffic impact study. So we are actually proposing a use with more units that is actually having less impact, more of a de minimis impact on the site than we could do under the zoning ordinance by right. And so, you know, I very respectfully submit, additionally, we included in the backup material in the transportation report, an analysis of crash data based upon the age of the drivers. And what this information shows is that the older the drivers get, the less likely they are engaged, or there's fewer crashes there's fewer crashes that involve those drivers. So again, we're showing that we are going to be providing or supporting dwelling units for a type of population that is actually less prone to crashes than if this was a non-age restricted. So not only are we proposing fewer trips than would be necessarily allowed, we actually have less dangerous drivers or crashes involved from these types of drivers. So I do respectfully submit, when in terms of transportation, now there is no probative evidence in the record to show that there's going to be any issue or concern with this, whether it's, based on a nuisance or traffic or anything like that. Next slide, please. The proposed use at this location will not overburden existing and planned public facilities. So I believe when talking about public facilities, the ordinance is referring to roads, water, sewer, school capacity, and emergency services. The proposed development will not overburden traffic for the reasons already mentioned, or the emergency services, which we had talked about previously. Water and sewage had been found to be adequate by Ms. Harrington in her presentation to the Board of Appeals on January 11th, 2023. But nonetheless, regarding water, with this type of development, it's actually going to, because they generally have smaller households, smaller homes, and it will result in actually less potable water usage. And with the 52% of undeveloped space, it requires minimal water once it's established. It doesn't have any sort of maintenance. So if we were to do more than that, it would actually probably use up more water. And regarding sewer, our goal and our plan, should this be approved, is to connect to an existing pumping station that is behind the adjoining Haldane subdivision. And if we can connect to this pumping station, we would actually propose improvements or modernizations to it, which we believe would be a benefit not just to us because we get to use it, but to the existing residents. Because we know of at least one lot owner who is having flooding issues from that pumping station. So we could come in there and fix it and hopefully alleviate that issue and maybe other issues that those residents are having with that pumping station. Next slide, please. The proposed use will not, 3, be detrimental to the use or development of adjacent properties or the neighborhood. So the special exception case law says that there is a presumption that a special exception use is compatible generally with permitted uses in the underlying zone, unless there is probative facts or evidence to show that there's inherent adverse effects above and beyond those for this particular use at this particular location. And given the facts of this case, there will not be a detriment to the use or development of adjacent properties. The density of our proposed development is similar to the Haldane subdivision, which I measured at about 1.92 dwelling units an acre, which is very comparable to our 2.08 dwelling units an acre. So we have very similar density, the same type of model, single family detached. And we also conform to the purposes of the zone we are in, the R21 zone, which has been established to primarily accommodate detached dwelling units and provide for low density residential development. And the standards there promote substantial accommodation for the preservation of open space or forest retention. As I've said, we are keeping 52% of the space area as open space, with 5.94 acres of woodland to be retained and an additional 1.97 acres to be reforested. Next slide, please. The proposed use will not change the character of the neighborhood in which the use is proposed, considering services currently provided, population density, character, and number of similar uses. As I've already mentioned, single-family detached homes in the R21 zone, which at a density similar to the other single-family detached homes in the improved subdivision, that's right to the east of us, north across Port Tobacco Road, Maryland 6, single-family detached in the R21, and to the west of us, there is the historic Grange property, which this development is in conformance with if that property was ever to be redeveloped or revised or anything. So this is not an issue. Next slide, please. The proposed use at this location will not constitute a nuisance because of noise, traffic, number of people, or type of physical activity. This use is likely to generate less noise or physical activity than other permitted uses at this location, let alone above and beyond those inherently associated with a senior living community. The central spine road is located away from adjoining property lines to mitigate any noise that is generated from vehicles within the subdivision. All homes proposed are oriented inwards toward the spine road and away from the adjoining properties. Landscaping or existing natural features will help provide additional buffering to mitigate any potential adverse impact on those properties. Regarding the traffic issue, we've already shown through the methods of calculating trips that the governing bodies do not find the amount of traffic and trip posed by this to be a nuisance or an issue. Otherwise, there would be a test required for it. And there is no standard or measurement or test under the La Plata ordinance to find adequacy of public facilities. So absent any standardization or any sort of methodology for saying when a project is or isn't meeting it, you have to look at what the facts are that we have provided. And that is we are having a de minimis number of additional trips on this use, fewer trips than would be proposed than would be allowed otherwise. And finally, with regards to the number of persons, with 52 of these units, they're generally 2-person households. So you're looking at, at maximum, maybe like 104 residents in this subdivision. Whereas, if this was a non-age restricted and it was only the 40 previously approved, well, some of those households might have 3 or 4 families in it. So you look at it actually, to 120 or 140, sorry, lawyer doing a math, 120, 160 residents if this was only 40 units, but it was non-age restricted. So in all of these cases, you can see that we are in conformance with the needs of the zoning ordinance. We are not a nuisance, and we do not have any adverse effects above and beyond what would be associated with a senior living community at this location. And so for that, I would request that this Board of Appeals approve our special exception. I'm here with the rest of my team. We are more than happy to answer any questions or concerns that the board may have.
Very nice, Mr. Burris.
Thank you. You definitely did your homework. Everything that we came to you about before appeared, you guys took it seriously and answered, and I appreciate that. No one's here to give a hard time. We're just here to make sure the city is the way it's supposed to be. However, I need you to educate me on something. Can we go back to the slide 1 for the findings? Nope, findings. Back. There, one more. Keep going.
Slide 4.
There. Nope, one more. One more. One more. Wow. Okay, one more. Okay, this one here. Educate me on the math, because I'm messing up here. We're using a case study that had 40 dwellings as an example for the traffic study. Okay. So we're looking at 40 dwellings, and we're looking at 32 peak hour trips AM, 42 PM. Is that correct?
I think these questions would be better directed at our traffic engineer, Mr. Nick Dribbin, who
Whoever wants to answer it, I'm fine.
Yes, that's correct.
Okay. So
Right, you're seeing something that says section 191-52G findings.
Correct.
That all has to do with the development across the street
I'm sorry, I don't know,
From
I don't know who's speaking, but.
by the Grange.
Who was that? Well, the chair hasn't recognized anybody but the panel, so I'm not sure who was speaking, but if you, want to make a statement, we'll get to that. Sorry, continue.
So what, I just want to make sure that my math is correct. So with that number, with those numbers, they were under the 35 and the 50, and that's what we're using the example to show for the traffic study. Is that correct?
Sort of. I think I could explain it a little bit more in depth, and I think that's what you're looking for. But so when we calculate the number of trips for development, we use something called the ITE, Institute for Transportation Engineers Trip Generation Manual. It's a 3-part document. Each one is a couple hundred pages. But basically what that document is it's a series of studies that have been conducted for any type of land use that you could conceive of. So hotel, shopping center, single family residences, senior restricted residences. They've gone out, different people have gone out throughout the United States over the course of, X number of years and counted the entrance to given developments. And they develop equations based on the number of units, in this case, the number of units in a development, and how many trips a development of that many units would generate. So that manual, the ITE Trip Generation Manual, is the standard methodology that's utilized to determine the trip numbers that you're seeing here. And for example, the 40 single family dwelling units, those numbers are based on studies that have been conducted for that use at over 200 locations around the country. And so from those 200 studies, they develop an average rate that if you have 40 dwelling units, it would generate that many trips.
Understood. Understood.
Yeah.
No, I appreciate that. It just confused me because, and so I'm looking at a 40 dwelling unit with those numbers, but now we're talking about a 52 unit, which has an additional 24 vehicles. And now we're saying we're not going to make 3 additional trips. You see where my question is here? It's like, we're saying 24 additional vehicles. We're not going to make just 3 more additional trips, peak in the morning or even in the evening. Even in the evening, we're not going to hit the 50. Got it. I'm concerned with the peak in the morning, that 24 additional vehicles is not going to hit 3 more trips.
Right. So what I guess what I was trying to get to with the trip generation manual is that there are different rates for different uses, right? So a single family, if you think about a typical trip pattern for a single family home, you might have somebody leaving. And we look at specifically when we do traffic studies or trip generation, we look at the peak hour of the morning. So the busiest hour on the roads in the morning, just 1 hour, and then the busiest hour, peak hour in the evening. And the idea is that if you look at the heaviest traffic hour in the morning, heaviest traffic hour in the evening, you're sort of capturing the worst case scenario.
Right.
So if you look at a typical traffic pattern for like a single family residence that might have 2 school-age children and 2 working parents, there's a decent likelihood that some number of vehicles is going to be leaving that house, maybe more than one. During the peak hours, right? You might have somebody leaving to go to their office. You might have somebody leaving to take the kids to school. If you have a 17-year-old that's got their license, they may also be leaving. Whereas senior housing, many of those residents are going to be retired. There are certainly trips that come from that development, but less of those trips are during the peak hour. And so the equations in the ITE Trip Generation Manual reflect those based on actual studies that have been done, again, throughout the country. And so what you're seeing, and I sort of get what you're saying intuitively, it looks a little off, but that's what it is. It's that the traffic patterns are different.
I completely understand what you're saying. I got it. I'm like I said, I just want to educate myself on this for the simple fact that I'm like, okay, your traffic study is based off of the types of dwellings that we're being involved in with stuff like that. And the 40 dwelling units could be a compromise of another type of homes. So it could be single family homes with, like I said, 2 parents in their 40s that go to work every day, maybe 2 teenage kids, each have a different car and are driving their friends to high school. Got it all. I understand that. What I want to make sure that when we took that all into consideration, we also took into consideration of the senior living. That number was also defined into this, only because, yes, I agree with you. Most of our senior citizens are intelligent enough to say, I'm not getting on the road at 6:30 in the morning with these kids They're smart enough to say, nah, I'll roll over and turn it and sleep in a little longer. And then they go out maybe about 9 or 10 o'clock and run their errands, do what they have to do. That's what I want to make sure that we do have that understanding.
Yes, absolutely. You've got it. And I guess the point of the slide is twofold. So the first part we're looking at when talks about 24 a.m. and the 27 p.m. peak hour trips, that's specifically for the 52 senior units that are being proposed based on the IT trip generation manual numbers. And the comparison to the 35 and 50 peak hour trip thresholds is, I think, as we've discussed, the town doesn't have their own adequate public facilities ordinance as it relates to traffic. So in many cases, when we do studies here, the sort of backup is to look at Charles County standards and state highway standards. And so the 35 trips, peak hour trips, is Charles County standard, wherein if you are developing something that based on the IT trip generation manual has greater than 35 trips, you must do a traffic study because you will have, they want to understand what the impact is. Below that, your impact is considered de minimis. Essentially, you're not putting enough traffic on the road for it to be even worthy of an analysis. And then the state highway, similarly, the 50 trip threshold is the state's threshold. So they look at it a little bit higher. But if you're greater than 50 trips, you have to do a full traffic impact study, evaluate your impacts. Below that, you're de minimis. So the point of the first, I guess, gold or yellow bullet is that this development in and of itself, 52 senior units, would not trigger a traffic study, a full traffic study by either county or state standards. It's considered de minimis by both of those traffic impact study standards. The point of the second gold or yellow bullet is comparing the 52 units to what would otherwise, I guess, to what was previously approved for this site, which was 40 just regular non-age restricted senior single family homes, not senior. And so again, kind of going back to the discussion we were having a moment ago, what was approved previously would actually generate more trips than what is being proposed now. So it's kind of two different points between the two bullets there.
Thank you.
Mr. Thorne, you have any questions?
Yes.
The chair recognizes Mr. Thorne.
So like my colleague here, I'd like to confirm, if we go with the original plan of putting non-age restrictive people in this development, we will get a traffic study, correct?
I mean, it would trigger a traffic study under Charles County guidelines, but
Okay.
that's not what's being proposed.
Okay, so now my question is basically for our attorney. With this new information, does that satisfy what we are required to review to vote on this?
Yes, can you hear me in the chambers?
We can.
Yes, so that they have now provided evidence, their testimony is provided as evidence that you can weigh whether it meets the criteria or not, but it certainly fills the hole that they have provided something. As was indicated, they do not need under other statutes to have a traffic study done, but they still must provide you with evidence that it's not going to create a nuisance, which is what their case is attempted to provide tonight.
Okay, so I do have, the issue that I have, and part of this is with the statute that we're working with and the fact that we don't have an adequate public facilities statute for the town of La Plata, which I hope town council will address, is because no traffic study was done, do you know what the current number of trips at that at the intersection of Route 6 and 301 is?
I mean, we have done other studies in the area, so I'm familiar with the intersection.
Okay, how many daily trips are at that intersection?
I couldn't tell you an exact number off the top of my
Okay,
head.
so adding at the minimum 340 daily trips, if it's 0 daily trips now to this current intersection that we have, no problem. But if it's 340 daily trips added to several hundred or in the thousands, I don't know what it is either, and which is one of the reasons why I would have preferred some kind of further study. I know other studies have been done for various other properties around because it's important. I think the number one issue on every resident of La Plata's mind is traffic. Our statute doesn't reflect what is on every La Plata resident's mind. But the statute that governs this board says we shall not grant any special exception unless we find from the evidence of record that it does not constitute a nuisance because of traffic. Now, council's, I think, very rightly said that that's it. There is no further detail in this statute as to what that means. I'm assuming, based on the fact that this is an administrative proceeding, that the applicant has to show by preponderance of the evidence that it is not a traffic nuisance. We haven't heard anybody on the other side yet. We might get to that in a minute. But it is very difficult for anybody, I think, on this board to make these decisions based on what we've got. So we don't know how many daily trips there are now, so we don't know what the total aggregate of daily trips at this intersection is going to be when this development is if this is approved and completed.
I could give you a ballpark. I mean,
Okay.
I think that based on what I've seen, I would say the number of trips through passing through the intersection of Route 6 and 301 is probably on the order of magnitude of 60,000 a day, 50 to 60,000. So, you know, this would be not even 1% of that, you know, daily. And again, when we do traffic studies, those are for the peak hours. So, you know, that's the worst case. If you go to that intersection, you know, obviously there's traffic throughout the day, but really the worst times are probably 7 to 9 a.m. and 4 to 6 p.m., somewhere in that range. And this development simply does not generate a substantial amount of traffic during that time. You know, and I would just point back, you know, not to be repetitive, but I would just point back that while the town does not have their own statute for public facilities, you know, there are a number of other statutes, both pointing to Charles County and the state of Maryland, but throughout the state, most jurisdictions have a threshold at which you must do a study and your traffic is no longer de minimis, right? In this case, the numbers that we're talking about wouldn't meet probably any of those in the state. So without you know, the study isn't even required to evaluate traffic because the impact is by its on its face de minimis based on the lack of substantial peak hour traffic.
And if I can just add to that, Mr. Chair, I understand your concern. Traffic is a big issue here. Traffic is a big issue all over the state. Traffic is a big issue over the country. And it's commonly an issue that arises in court and during a special exception hearing. So I understand what you're saying, that there is traffic issues, but when it comes to the special exception for this case, because that's what we're here for, there is no evidence in the record to show that traffic will be a nuisance. We've used the required methodology for this site to test it. There's no inherent, every development is going to include traffic. I don't, especially, I don't know what development won't. That is inherent in it. And there's a presumption that a special exception is harmonious and conducive and compatible with uses in the underlying zone. So if you didn't want development at this site, then it shouldn't be zoned R21 to allow this type of use. And if you didn't want senior housing, then it shouldn't be a special exception. I understand you're working with statutes that you don't necessarily agree with or find to be the most helpful in the situation, but that is the rules of the game that we all find ourselves playing with. And, so unless there is any probative evidence to the contrary, this special exception I respectfully submit, should be approved. And it's not based upon the idea that traffic is particularly special at this location, because there's no evidence to it, and it's not required to be included in the record, just that it's not a nuisance. And we have shown that it's not a nuisance in light and in view or in the perspective of the established special exception case law, starting with Schultz v. Pritz, going through Loyola College, and all the other myriad of cases that review when it is an adverse effect above and beyond the effects normally associated with the use. So with all due respect, Mr. Chair, I believe we have met our burden of production and persuasion to get the special exception in terms of traffic. Thank you.
Okay. Do you have any other thing for the record?
And no,
Yeah.
Mr. Chair, we are more than happy to answer any questions that you might have.
I
you,
don't
the
have
board.
any further questions. Does any other member of the board have any further questions? Okay, is there, Madam Clerk, is there anyone who signed up to make a statement for this issue?
No, Mr. Chair.
So having listened to the additional evidence provided today, my inclination is that the applicant has, well, it's complicated because I think we're looking at 19152G 1A, that the proposed use does not violate or adversely affect the town of La Plata comprehensive plan. The comprehensive plan has multiple stated goals, some of which I think are in conflict with development and some of which aren't. I think the goals of having adequate senior housing and allow people to age in place and making sure that we maintain open space with every development, walkability, sustainability, and et cetera, are generally met with this plan. I do have some concern about the walkability factor, because I don't know when the last time I ever saw somebody cross Route 301 and the pedestrian crossing is, but it's difficult because there's no other way to get anywhere around here other than driving, even though we're trying to be more walkable. But I don't find that it, unless a member of the board finds otherwise, I do not find that this violates or adversely affects the Town of La Plata Comprehensive Plan. Any discussion? Okay. I think the tract is suitable for the development proposed. It's already zoned R21. I think that the proposed use, so in 19152G-C, when it refers to subsection H, that would be H28 senior living communities. And it does meet those requirements, those factors in that part of the statute. And then we get to D. I don't see how a development of this kind would affect the health and safety of residents or workers in the area. This isn't a factory or anything like that. That's going to be or some other, or a bar or something that might add anything to overburden existing and planned public facilities. Does any member of the board have any discussion of that factor? I think that there is some question as to, I know that there is some concern and question as to the future planning of water facility, water resources in the town. But the planning department has determined for this project that there is no risk of overburdening existing and planned public facilities. 3 is be detrimental to the use or development of adjacent properties or the neighborhood. This would be a development next to another subdivision, which already has several homes in it. We did hear testimony at the last hearing from the homeowner of the property on the other side, who was not in favor because they were worried about traffic and et cetera. It is my opinion today that the testimony of those residents who own the historic property there did not provide anything other than anecdotal evidence as to increased traffic, although I do take very seriously their concerns. But I believe we are, this board anyway, is limited by the statutes that we're dealing with. Is there any discussion of that?
Yes.
Yes. Okay, Mr. Burris.
I want to follow, I just want to ask this question. Is last time that individual made a comment that he was not aware, he was not notified or received documentation about what was happening or about the meeting we were having, the Board of Appeals meeting we were having. He just came across it. Was there an opportunity for them to be aware of this one as well, to be hand stuff out or pass out flyers, or because that was a concern of this individual last time? not sure if you remember or not.
Madam Clerk, was a written notice mailed to, I don't have his name in front of me, to that individual?
Yes, sir, Mr. Chair, there was.
Does that satisfy
Yes,
you?
it does.
Okay. Change the character of the neighborhood. Well, it's not a neighborhood now, it's woods. But I don't believe the population density, and the uses next door are similar. And I think at this point, based on the information provided, there's no adverse evidence to the fact that the traffic will not be a nuisance. And so I think that the applicant has successfully met the factors in code section 191-52G. Now in G2, the Board of Appeals may impose other requirements not specifically listed in this article to ensure the health, safety, and welfare of all persons within the town of La Plata. I propose that we approve the application with the caveat that adequate sidewalks will be provided fronting this property. I know that this was discussed at the prior hearing, to adjoin with any existing sidewalks that may be, so because in order to actually be this is fairly close to downtown La Plata on the other side of Route 301. But beyond La Plata Methodist Church, I don't believe there are any sidewalks out there. So that the landowner would work with the neighboring property owners and the town to make sure that any sidewalk that is built in front, I think, am I wrong, or was there a sidewalk planned for the 301 frontage of this property? Yes, okay. And so the special condition that I propose is that sidewalk, to make sure we coordinate with the town when we're building that sidewalk, so that it will be easily integrated with any sidewalks on adjoining properties, so that somebody can have an easy walk from this facility to up the road to downtown.
And I would just add a clarification that since it's a state highway right away, they'd have to coordinate with the state, not the town directly.
Very good. I will amend my proposal then for that. So can I have a second for my proposal?
Second.
Okay, all in favor of my proposal under 191-52G2? Aye. And then for generally for approval of the application, can I have a second of that? Okay, and all in favor of approving the application for the Grange subdivision at this time? Aye. Thank you. All right. Mr. Scott, I believe you're up. So at this time, and again, I just want to restate on the record, I asked Madam Clerk, there were no additional public comments for the previous issue today, correct?
Correct.
That's correct, Mr. Chair.
Thank you. Okay. And how many public comments do we have signed up for the second issue?
There was one public comment attached to the agenda, and at the last check, there were 3 speakers registered.
Okay. I noticed there are a lot of people in the audience. That's much more than 3 people who signed up. I will allow anyone who wants to speak to speak. However, I do need you to sign up so we know your names. And I'm going to limit the public comment to 3 minutes, just because there are a lot of people here and it's already 8 o'clock. But if anybody who is in the gallery who wishes to address the board after the applicant is finished, I don't know if Madam Clerk can bring back out the sign-in sheet. Please sign up during their presentation so I know who you are. And so at this time, we'll call to order, the public hearing for case number BOA 000-650-2023 Oriole Lane. Madam Clerk, will you please review the public notice for this hearing?
Yes, Mr. Chair, for the record, this public hearing was advertised in the Southern Maryland newspaper in the March 17th, 2023 issue as reflected on the certificate of publication attached to the meeting agenda. As indicated in the clerk's affidavit, letters were sent to owners of all properties contiguous to and opposite the property by certified mail, and a sign was posted visible from Oriole Lane, Magnolia Lane, and Hawthorne Road, the adjoining public rights-of-way. Notice of this public hearing was also advertised on the town webpage.
Thank you, Madam Clerk. And Director Harrington, the staff presentation.
Good evening again. For the record, Janine Harrington, Director of Planning for the Town of La Plata. So this is also a special exception request for a senior living community. However, this one is located in the commercial highway zone. The Foundation LLC is applying for the special exception to develop 11.29 acres in the commercial highway district to allow for senior living community in accordance with the Town of La Plata Town Code Section 191-10. And I think I got the use wrong on that one. I didn't change it. This is for multifamily instead of single family, subject to the special provisions listed in section 191-52.h.28. So this parcel, as noted, is 11.29 acres. It is also currently undeveloped. Under the comprehensive plan designation, it was medium density residential. To the north is commercial and existing residential, a zoned commercial highway. To the south, there are vacant land as well as commercial properties, which are zoned commercial highway. To the east are commercial properties, zoned commercial highway, and to the west is residential R10 and existing subdivision. So the property is located kind of set back from Route 301. It has access to Magnolia Drive and Oriole Lane. The applicant is requesting the approval of 72 senior living apartments. And since it's zoned commercial highway, it is subject to the special exception approval under the town zoning ordinance. On this application, you will note other buildings. The special exception is for only one of the three proposed multifamily buildings on the property. As shown on the site plan, page 18 of the submission, buildings A and B are not age restricted. So this would only be provisional to building C for the age restricted special exception request. If the special exception is approved, this would proceed with a major site plan in order to review more closely for water, sewer, stormwater management, forest conservation, and other zoning requirements. The Planning Commission reviewed the proposal on April 4th, 2023, and made the following recommendation. I move to recommend to the Board of Appeals to allow approval for the construction of a senior living community as shown and detailed in the Planning Commission staff report. For the criteria for approval and findings, for Chapter 191-52.f, they have reference document BOA-000650- I messed up. It's 2023. My apologies. Special exception report. Staff has reviewed the special exception application and found that a tax map and detailed site plan have been provided in accordance with this section. And for section 191-52.g, again, with the reference document special exception report, they did provide a written report and outline all of the requirements of the section. Under chapter 191-52.h.28, all of the standards have been met as outlined in the town code. Staff is recommending approval to allow for the construction of the senior living community as shown and detailed in the staff report and in the reference documents. If you have any questions of me, I'd be happy to answer those.
I have some questions. So this is zoned commercial highway. The planning department has already approved the development of the apartment complex without the special exception. Is that
No,
correct?
the special exception the use must be approved prior to proceeding forward with the major site plan.
And for buildings A and B of the development, are those already approved?
No,
Okay. And this is located just behind the Pepsi plant. Is that correct?
correct. There's Marie's Diner, Pepsi plant,
Pepsi, I mean,
McDonald's.
and the old Will's building.
Correct.
Okay. And just for my education, the high density, would these count as high density developments in this location?
No, not for the per density per dwelling, or, can't speak anymore. Dwelling unit per acre, it would not be considered high density.
And so it's medium density at this point.
Correct, in
Okay.
accordance with the comprehensive plan.
Gotcha. And so, the comprehensive plan calls for development in such a way as to increase the focus the development in downtown La Plata, correct?
That's one of the provisions
Okay.
in the
One-
comprehensive plan.
And to, and to increase walkability. Correct?
Correct.
Okay. So yeah, the main question here is a project like this, which is a major apartment complex, and again, we're only, if everybody's looking at the screen, we're only concerned about the portion to on the right third of this property, which is surrounded by a road. That is the part that requires a special exception. The reason why I'm asking these questions is to establish sort of a baseline. Again, the project itself has not 100% been approved for any of this development. Is that correct?
That is correct. They must get a special exception approval before proceeding. For
And
that
well, that's for this.
building.
I mean, for the entire lot, the entire property that this is a section of, none of this has actually been approved for construction.
No,
Okay. And that's because the next step in we grant the special exception potentially, and then it goes back to planning and
Correct.
for approval and et cetera, for
Correct.
further study.
if they wanted to, they could proceed forward with the other two buildings separately, but they are choosing to do the special exception
Correct.
first as a whole to make this.
Well, right, but even those other two buildings, if they wanted to proceed without waiting for the special exception, there's more layers of
Correct.
approval process before it gets there.
Yes,
Okay. And all we're concerned with today is whether or not a senior living facility in this location meets the criteria to grant a special exception,
correct,
not whether or not they can build here at all.
correct.
Thank you. Okay. Any other questions from the board? Mr. Burson.
Just to elaborate, I know he just ran through this, but if a special consideration is not granted, are the other two buildings still going up?
They could potentially, it's up to the applicant, but
Right,
the
that's-
way it's laid out, they could proceed forward with that, even if the special exception wasn't approved. If they wanted to turn that third building into regular apartments, they could proceed forward with the major site plan.
Thank you.
That's the only question. Okay. And again, and sorry, I think you answered it, but if we were to deny the special exception, that does not prevent development of this property.
Correct.
Okay.
They have the rights under the zoning code to build on the property in accordance with the commercial highway zone and the permitted uses.
And potentially there could be more hearings, there could be more, but it's not in front of this body.
Correct.
Thank you. All right. Anybody else have any questions?
Not yet.
Okay. I think we'll proceed to the applicant, presentation at this time.
Yes, good evening, Mr. Chair, Board of Appeals members. My name is Steve Scott. I'm a land use counsel for the applicant. Let me introduce first our cast of characters here. We've got Jessica Zuniga with Foundation Development. We've got Tyler Grote with Osprey Companies. Stacy Lagana with Lorenzi Dodd and Ganell. And we've got Nick Dribbin, who you just saw in the other case, with Linhart Traffic Consulting. As the staff report indicates, and as was just discussed, it's important to understand the sort of posture of this case. It's a little confusing, but when we look at this case, we're actually looking at a proposal to soften the allowable uses on this property because the property could be developed as a multifamily project without the senior component. The special exception is necessary because of the proposal to add the senior component, which actually, based upon the testimony that you will hear, actually reduces the impacts on traffic and some of the other facilities within the town of La Plata. So this is an opportunity, or I guess a proposal by the applicant to actually reduce the impacts by adding this senior housing component. And again, in the CH zone, it's important to remember that this project could be developed as a multifamily project without this senior housing component. So we have a presentation for you. We have everybody's going to sort of participate in this proposal and this presentation this evening. And first, we want to introduce you to who you're dealing with in terms of the development partner in this project. And so I'm going to turn it over to Tyler to give you some background on Osprey Development. Yeah, I was having trouble with it too.
I had the same problem.
Good evening. Thanks, Steve. As he said,
Actually, I think we didn't do this last time because everybody was, well, I thought everybody was still under oath from the previous hearing, but I think everybody who's going to testify needs to raise their right hand. And do you, well, I'm going to ask you all to please state your name for the record, starting from my right. No, not address, just your name's fine.
Tyler Brody.
Nick Driven.
And do each of you swear that any testimony you're about to give under the penalties of perjury will be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
Yes.
I
yes,
do.
Thank you. Okay, proceed.
Yeah, so I'm here on behalf of the applicant, along with our partner, Jessica Zuniga and Foundation Development. I work for Osprey Property Company. We are a Maryland-based developer, been in business since 1988.
If I'm sorry, folks in the gallery, that I can hear you whispering. That means the microphones can too. Sorry.
So we're a Maryland-based developer. We've been in business for 35 years now, primarily focused in multifamily development, senior living development. Also have a portfolio of some retail and industrial properties as well. We have experience all over the state, including in Southern Maryland, Charles County, Calvert County, St. Mary's County, the Eastern Shore, up in the Baltimore region, outside of DC. Maryland is our home. We develop all over the state. We take great pride in the development of our properties. I think at the end of the slide show here, I don't know if we want to skip ahead to that.
Yeah, Madam Clerk, at the end of our slideshow, we've got some photographs of projects that Osprey has developed. I wonder if we could bring those up and sort of skip ahead to that. Tyler, go ahead.
Yep. So these are just a couple of representative projects, just to give you an idea of the quality of the product that we develop. These are all recently developed projects. If you go up just a little bit more, 2 more slides. So this is a project over in Prince Frederick in Calvert County that we developed and was opened in 2021. This is a non-age restricted garden style community right in the Prince Frederick Town Center, 96 units. You get an idea of the architectural style there. Kind of fits in with the surrounding uses, other multifamily projects there as well. If you keep scrolling down. An idea of the interiors that we're working with here. This is one of our age-restricted properties, similar to what we're proposing with this special exception. This project is also in Calvert County in Lusby. The Southern Pines 2 senior facility. This is age-restricted for folks 62 and over. This opened in 2018. Another beautiful project that fits in with the community there and was filled a great need for senior living in that community. And if you keep scrolling down, Lakeview at Victoria Park, so just up the road in Waldorf. This was a project that we acquired and put through a significant renovation that completed in 2020. Brought this project up to current standards for amenities and finishes throughout the building, and is a nice senior facility. That project is age restricted for 55 and over. So this just gives you an idea of the type of projects that we develop. We have a plethora of experience here in Southern Maryland, and we're excited to to be here in the town of La Plata to bring forth this project.
So, Mr. Chair, we, and board members, we show you those photographs to sort of give you an idea of the quality of the project. Of course, one of the provisions of the code ordinance indicates that the project will not create a nuisance on the community. One of the other questions that these types of projects often face is how are they going to be managed? Are they going to be professionally managed? Will management be on site? And of course, an unmanaged multifamily project can in fact create a nuisance on the community. So with respect to the management side of this particular project, we're going to have Jessica give you a quick overview of that.
Good evening, Mr. Chair, members of the board. My name is Jessica Zanika, and I'm from Foundation Development Group, which is a development company. We have been in existence for almost 10 years now and developed over 1,000 units, also based in Maryland. We've worked with Tyler's company on several other communities in Maryland as well, and also in Pennsylvania. And we are active in Virginia too. To Steve's point, I also am a partner in a management company or a professional management company. We're actually celebrating our 40th year this year. We are Maryland based in Columbia. We manage 9,000 units across 4 different states, with our core portfolio being here in Maryland. We do have communities as close as St. Mary's and as close as Prince George's in the Bowie area. And we're very experienced in senior housing. Our portfolio is probably about 65% senior age restricted housing.
And Jessica, with respect to this particular project, can you explain the management team that will be on site?
Yeah, so our philosophy is that we want full-time on-site presence for all of our communities. A community of this size, we would have 4 full-time staff members and likely 1 to 2 part-time staff members as well. We do offer 24-hour emergency maintenance service, so our residents always have someone to call if they have a challenge in off hours. At a community this size, we probably will operate 6 days a week, so probably Monday through Saturday, our office will be staffed.
Thank you. Next, Mr. Chair and board members, I'm going to have Stacy Lagana take you through our PowerPoint. And in connection with that PowerPoint presentation, we're going to touch on the other elements or factors necessary for this board to find in granting this special exception. So I'm going to turn it over to Stacy.
Good evening. As Steve said, I'm Stacy Lagana with Lorenzi, Dodds and Gunnell. If we could advance to the next slide, please. So this is just an overview of the project location. We're in the northwestern quadrant of the town. The property also has frontage as seen here on Hawthorne Road, Magnolia Drive, and Oriole Lane, and it is 11.29 acres. So if we can forward to the next slide, please. So this shows basically the zoning on the left-hand side here. Our property is zone CH, and you can see we have neighboring R10 and R8 zones. On the right-hand side, this is just zoomed in a little so you can see the existing conditions. It's undeveloped and a primarily wooded site at the current time. Next slide, please. Okay, so this is the proposed conceptual plan. As noted, the area highlighted in red is the 72 senior living apartments and subject to the special exception. The area in blue are the 48 non-age restricted apartments. We have 2 points of access planned. We have Magnolia Drive and Oriole Lane. This allows for adequate ingress and egress to and from the site. It's also ideal for emergency services should there ever be an emergency. We also have a clubhouse and playground shown on the site. We will have sidewalks and pedestrian ways throughout the project. And this project serves really as an appropriate transition from the high intensity commercial uses along 301. Then you have this kind of medium density residential use as a transition to the adjoining residential neighborhoods. Next slide, please. So this slide shows the buffer yards and screening that we are proposing to provide. We're going to meet all code requirements for buffer yards and screening. We have a 50-foot buffer yard type F shown along That would be the eastern property line at the bottom of the screen there. That 50-foot buffer yard, for every 100 feet, we will have 5 canopy trees, 7 understory trees, 30 shrubs, and 15 evergreen trees. So it'll be a pretty hefty buffer yard. There was some concern expressed in a letter that was on the record that the stormwater management was within this buffer yard, and that is not the case. The stormwater management facilities are not within this buffer yard. Next slide, please. So with the comprehensive plan compatibility, a lot of these items have already been hit on tonight, but I'll review them again. Basically, this site is designated as medium density residential as a residential land use. And medium density use designation typically provides a transition to commercial areas, which is exactly what we're doing here. It also encourages a range of housing to welcome a diverse population. And again, this also supports the comprehensive plan in that it allows aging in place initiatives and us to attract and retain seniors that are already here. Next slide, please. Okay, so the town code sets forth some specific criteria for the senior living use. I think Janine hit on some of these, but I'll just run through them again. Direct access to a collector, arterial, or primary street, and we have met that. We are accessing Magnolia Drive and Oriole Lane. We're required to have a minimum of 4 acres. We have 11.29 acres. We're required to have 100 feet of frontage on a collector, arterial, or primary street, and we do have that on Magnolia Drive and Oriole Lane. The setback requirements need to be met, which we have met all of the setback requirements. We have to have a maximum density of 15 dwelling units per acre, and we have 3 dwelling units per acre, so significantly less than what would be allowable under the code. We must meet all code dimensional requirements, which we have. We must have adequate buffering, which we have provided, and we must provide recorded covenants prior to building permit, which we fully intend to do. Next slide, please. Okay, so these are the specific criteria for granting of a special exception. So the first one does not violate or adversely affect the comprehensive plan. We went over the slide earlier and we are in conformance with the comprehensive plan. Tract is suitable for the proposed development. This tract meets all the code requirements, including but not limited to acreage, setbacks, intensity, and buffering. And in addition, we will be going through the development review process for all approvals and permits to ensure everything is code compliant. And this tract is suitable for the development. The next one satisfies all senior living code requirements. We reviewed those on the previous slide and we do meet all of those. Will not adversely affect the health and the safety of the residents. Again, this project will need to meet all the code requirements. It will be thoroughly reviewed by all agencies to be code compliant, to not adversely affect the health or the safety of the residents. Will not overburden the existing and planned public facilities. We actually have a water and sewer tap already in place to this site it was put there for the future development of this site. No school allocations will be required for the senior living building. And again, we will be going through the review process. So it will be thoroughly reviewed as far as any existing or planned public facilities and our impact to those. Will not be detrimental to use or development of adjacent properties. This project will not be detrimental to the use or development of adjacent properties. The code puts measures in place such as buffering and setbacks to adjacent properties, which we've reviewed and we are providing. Will not change the character of the neighborhood. This property is zoned CH and the proposed use is significantly less intense than some of the other permitted uses in the commercial highway zone. In fact, as mentioned earlier, this proposed use will provide a transition from that high intensity commercial uses along 301 in the CH zone to the adjoining residential subdivisions. Will not constitute a nuisance due to noise, traffic, number of people, or type of physical activity. The code puts provisions in place to ensure that this project is not a nuisance due to noise. And we have provided a traffic impact statement that's included in the report, and our traffic engineer will go over that in greater detail in just a second. Also of note is that the Planning Commission will have the opportunity to comment and review this project in greater detail and all of these, the traffic study and things like that at the site development plan stage. So I think that concludes my portion.
Okay, Stacy, I want to just go back and review a couple of those elements. First, with respect to comprehensive land use plan compliance, you mentioned that that this particular project would provide a transition between the high intensity or high density commercial uses along 301 and the residential uses that are to the west of this project. Is that one of the goals of the comprehensive plan
Yes, it is.
to transition high intensity uses into the residential uses?
Yes,
Also, you mentioned that there will be sidewalks throughout this particular project. Obviously, walkability, and the chairman mentioned that, is a goal of the comprehensive land use plan.
yes, it is.
And with respect to the mix of housing types, of course, this is again a transition between single-family detached, and I think there are also some senior housing in St. Mary's Villas. Is this something that provides the count or the city, the town, with a needed mix of housing type, this multifamily and senior housing? And so it would be your testimony, of course, that this project complies with a comprehensive land use plan.
Yes.
And I want to go back to overburdening existing or planned facilities. With respect to water and sewer, obviously, this project will have to comply with the town's water and sewer ordinance.
Yes.
And that will require a study and an indication that there is sufficient capacity and a means to connect to the public system.
Correct. Yes. We will
Um,
provide those studies.
And then, of course, you mentioned traffic. We'll have Nick Dribbin testify with respect to traffic shortly. Let's go back to be detrimental to the use or development of adjacent properties or the neighborhood. So this property is zoned commercial highway, CH. What kind of uses can be put on this property by right? And that is without coming to this board.
Any type of high density residential uses, as well as really anything you see along the 301 corridor.
So stores and office
Retail.
buildings, retail,
Yes.
restaurants, in theory, at least some kind of restaurant, if it met the requirements
Office buildings, retail, retail, all of those, a
Okay.
whole array of uses, yes.
So again, zoned commercial highway, it's open to those kind of uses without a special exception.
Correct.
And also to emphasize it again, zone commercial highway, this property is available for multifamily development without the age restriction by right,
Correct.
without coming to this board.
Correct.
Okay, and the reason we're here at this point is because the applicant decided to add an age restricted component to the project.
Correct.
Okay, and I think that's all we have on for Stacy at this point. We would take record notice, of course, of the staff report and the Planning Commission's recommendation. Also record notice of the fact that the elements and requirements for the special exception were listed carefully in the applicant's application in this particular case. Now, to emphasize or to sort of focus on traffic, I know that's obviously always an interesting and important topic for these projects. Nick Dribbin has prepared a traffic impact statement, but we also want to let the board know that we're in the process of preparing a traffic impact study for this particular project. And we're working with the town's traffic engineer on that process. And I think I'd ask Nick to kind of explain that in further detail.
Yes. So again, for the record, Nick Dribbin with Lenhart Traffic. So as Director Harrington mentioned earlier, the purpose of the hearing tonight, as you all are well aware, is to evaluate the special exception to have senior adult housing multifamily on this property. We conducted a traffic statement looking at a comparison of what would be allowed by right, the number of trips generated by just regular, as an example, multifamily housing, non-age restricted versus the proposed age restricted housing. And the impacts of the age restricted housing, as we discussed in the previous case, are substantially less than those of what would be allowed, again, by right, which would be non-age restricted housing, or a number of other uses, as Mr. Scott mentioned. In this case, the trip generation numbers work out that the trips for senior age-restricted multifamily housing are roughly half of what would be allowed by right. I can provide specific numbers if you'd like to hear them, but essentially, what's being proposed is well below the 35 trip threshold that the county has, as well as the 50 trip threshold that the state has for a full traffic impact study to be required. So the special exception piece of it, specifically looking at the senior adult housing, has much less impact than what's allowed by right, and really would be considered de minimis traffic. That said, as Mr. Scott mentioned, as the rest of the site develops, there will be a full traffic impact study required. And this piece of it would be included within that study, as well as any other proposed development, which at this time they're looking at regular multifamily non-age restricted housing for the other units. So we've already started the process of scoping the full traffic impact study for the rest of the site, including this piece, with the town's engineer. And we've collected data for the study intersections and begun to run the analysis for that. So as this project progresses through the subsequent stages of development review within the town, there will be a traffic impact study included that will evaluate some of the issues that were discussed at the previous hearing. But again, related specifically to the senior component of this and the need for a special exception, this use is much less intensive than what could otherwise be developed on this site.
Thank you, Nick. Mr. Chair mentioned that the town is developing its own APFO, Adequate Public Facilities Ordinance. I believe in the meantime, it's been the town's policy to follow the Charles County APFO with respect to traffic. One of the things we want to indicate to the Board of Appeals is that with respect to this special exception, the applicant will accept a condition that the senior component of this particular project have a traffic impact study and provide any mitigation that would be provided or would need to be provided following the county's ordinances. So we're certainly happy to put that on the record and to allow that as a condition. Now, remember, we're allowed to develop this project as a full multifamily project currently in the town of La Plata without necessarily going through traffic mitigation, depending on whether the APFO is adopted at some point and applies to a project like this, depending on its status. But for purposes of this special exception and with respect to the senior housing component, we're prepared to accept a condition that indicates that a traffic impact analysis will be done for the senior housing component, and that if it indicates that mitigation is necessary, we'll agree to do that mitigation. And with that, just summarizing before we open it up for questions. Again, I don't want to sound like a broken record, but the particular project or property, this property is Zone CH Commercial Highway. It can be developed for a number of high density uses. Maybe high density implies more residential, just strike that word, but certainly high intensity commercial uses. It can also be developed for this medium density residential use without this senior component by simply following the town's ordinances and without the need for this special exception. So we want to emphasize again with respect to this special exception, we believe we're softening the use and softening the impacts of this particular project on the city, on the town, on the surrounding neighborhood, on the community. We also think that this will provide a nice mix of housing with the senior component and the non-age restricted component. And our client finds that provides a very, very nice community and mixture of people within the community and quality projects. And with that, we'll open it up for questions.
Thank you, Mr. Scott. Mr. Burris?
Questions after you witnesses or after the people speak.
I think what we'll do is if we have questions for this panel, we'll ask them now, and then we'll move on to the public statements, and then we'll have our deliberation.
Okay.
So if you have questions for the panel, fire away.
Long time, Nick. How you doing? So yeah, so these things are from my perspective are a little difficult, and I'll explain to you why. Here is you guys have sat here through the first board that we just went through. You weren't here at the last one. What I explained at the last one was that, so for me, I've lived here for 17 years. Okay, I've lived here. I love my city, I love my county, I love my state. Okay, and I've seen the growth and I've seen the things it's gone through. And some of the things that concern me as I watch all these new homes being built here, okay, is something that's not addressed. Is how you're going to limit the crime that comes with it. And the reason I say that is because looking at your location, okay, because I wasn't going to bring this up until, I'm sorry, Mr. Scott
Steve,
brought it up. The commercial highway zoning, okay, you're absolutely right. That's a good spot to put this. It is. But at the same time, Charles County has built up, and Clune has built up tenfold residentials, and we have not built up jobs. So what you're doing is you're about to take a property that we could put commercial highway, like I said, put realtor, put businesses where we can bring jobs in for the people who are all moving here. So for me, it's a little difficult, but I understand it. I do. So you understand my passion behind why what I feel sitting up here. The things that concern me here is, and Janine, you probably help me out with this, is we have two parts to this. One's a senior living, and another is, what's the term for it? Anyone can live there, or whatever.
Multifamily apartments.
Multifamily apartments, okay? And although we're here just for the special exception for the senior living, I can't help but to think about what's all coming with it. And then the residents that live behind that, who've been there for years, besides bushes, what protection are we providing these homes, vehicles, and people living there from the multifamily homes that are being built? Because we all know that what comes with teenagers is kids being kids, windows being broken, rocks being thrown. So I hear about bushes. I don't hear what other type protections being provided for those homes. And I understand, I hear you talking about the security, I hear you talking protection about the seniors living in that building. But we have to look at everything around that property, which includes the residents that live there behind it, that live on the other side of those bushes, that sit there and say, you know, I got kids walking through here. I have them coming through here, flashlights, or the residents that live there, they got apartment, like at lights, and are shining into our the neighbors who live there, their places, and the nuisance. There is a level of nuisance that's going to happen, no matter how you try to mitigate it. My question is, has that been part of the initial planning that came through you guys, or is that still being drawn up, the criminal aspect or the nuisance behind what's going to come with all three of those buildings?
I think we could address this if Tyler and or Jessica want to address this. I think this is something we're not finding with other similar projects that they've developed and they manage. I don't know if one of you all want to.
Obviously, you know, we can't control people, right? But what we can do is we can control the environment that we're building, and we can also have lease controls, and we can have screening controls. So, you know, the commitment we can make is that, you know, we do criminally screen, we do background checks on every adult who is in all of our households. So we may have one adult who is the leaseholder, but if there are other adults in the household, we also do background checks and criminal screenings on them as well. So we do our due diligence on our residents. We also do landlord references. So we do call up to 3 years worth of landlords. We want to know how you treated their property. We want to know how you paid your rent. We want to know if you disturbed your neighbors. We want to know if you are a good neighbor. So that's the level of due diligence we do on our residents. We have leases that have strict standards in regards to noise. You know, we have quiet hours, so to speak, over the middle of the night. We do have community rules, that talk about, long-term guests. They talk about just generally being good to your neighbors, right? Not creating noise, not creating disturbances, not leaving cars in the parking lot that are disabled, right? We have, so we really, and I think the on-site management piece of this is really key. Because if you don't have someone there watching to see if people are following the rules and then enforcing the rules, you will have a problem, whether you have the rules or not. So I think that is certainly a commitment that we can make to you, that those are the things that we do. We do our level of due diligence on all of our residents. We also have people on site. We have strong rules and we work to enforce them. And in regards to security, we do we usually have security camera systems, that are monitored at all of our communities. We have those around the sites. We usually do a lot of lighting. We try to be respectful of adjacent properties so that we're not shining light on them, but we do try to have well-lit areas that could become areas where people can hide. We do try to light those. We have, particularly with the senior building, everything will be controlled access. So people won't be able to get into the senior building without a key fob. So they will need to live there. If they don't live there, they'd have to use the intercom system to buzz in. So we do take this very seriously. We take very seriously that we are doing our due diligence on our residents and we are trying to control and protect the environment.
Thank you. I understood that. But my concern was something you actually said earlier was, 6 days. So is the 7th day a free for all?
Not usually. We'll have to rest 1 day a week, right? Everyone does. No, I think, it is the cameras obviously help, right? So people do see them. We do make them visible. We don't try to hide them. So people do know that they're there. I do think the due diligence on your residents and when you are there Monday through Saturday, enforcing those rules and people knowing that you will enforce those rules and you will remove them from the housing is incredibly important.
I will also note that once we get to the major site plan phase, we do give our police department the chance to review. We've, since the January 11th meeting that we had, I've had subsequent meetings with the University of Maryland Charles Regional Medical Center, as well as the Charles County Emergency Services. And all of them are being included in future conversations. Plans will be forwarded to the county E911 and emergency services for their input and review, as well as the fire department. So they are all open to providing commentary on our major site plans.
Thank you, ma'am.
Okay.
Although it wasn't said, but just so it's for the record, you will be managing the senior living and the non-senior living buildings.
Yes, sir.
Okay. The senior living building C, is that 55 or 62 and older?
55.
55 and older. And how many floors?
3.
3 floors. Okay.
Four.
So
4.
4 floors.
Yeah.
Wow. Okay. Do we have a topography map that shows how a 4th floor is going, how high it's going to be, and will the residents behind them see this building?
We do not have such a map, but I think we're doing the math in our head right now, how high that is. Yeah.
Yeah.
45, thank you.
It's like 45, 50 feet. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah.
But the topography of how it's going to sit there on the property with the current residents, is that?
I think generally that topo falls off as you approach US Route 301. I don't know if you've run any topo yet.
Some topography on the site, and it does fall away from 301.
Ladies and gentlemen, don't worry, you'll have a chance to talk. Let's try to keep the,
I have other questions, but I want to hold on to them right now.
Yes, Mr. Burris.
I'm sorry, he just reminded me, that was one of the things I meant to ask about. 4 floors. If I'm looking out, am I looking into my residents' backyards? Am I looking at what they're doing back there? Is their privacy gone? That's my question.
You want to address that?
Leave, and yeah, Stacy can talk a little bit more about that too, but that's the point of the buffer yard requirements, 50 yards and plantings that she referenced with the number of trees.
Well, 50 feet.
forestation. 50 feet.
There's no bushes that go 50 feet. That's why I'm asking. It's like, so you're gonna be putting up pine trees all across the back to protect those from 4 floors up? Those are the questions. And then as we look at bushes and trees, we know that there's gaps. So we're putting up a fence line now that's protecting what's going to be walking underneath that, which are those neighbors or the new residents and stuff like that. So I think it's Magnolia's right behind it.
Correct.
Can I get in my swimming pool without them people staring out the window at me?
Yes, that's the plan, is to provide enough buffer zone. We'll have fencing in place to separate the properties. Yes.
Yeah, ideally, if we can possibly preserve any of the existing mature vegetation, we would like to do that as well. That will evolve as we design the project as far as if we can preserve any of that existing vegetation.
And also, let's keep in mind that the the ordinances, the zoning ordinance adopted by the mayor and council says, yes, you can build a building that tall in the commercial highway zone. So they've made that conscious decision that it can be done.
I agree with you. I understand that. But my job is to be their conscious and say, did they ask all the questions?
Well, I think we also have to remember that, we're in a town, we're in a designated development district within Charles County, and the county's comprehensive land use plan designates the town of La Plata as a development district, and then the town's comprehensive land use plan designates the downtown area as their primary development district. So this mix of zones and the uses allowed in these mixes of zones, they're intended to be consistent with what was intended, provided for, and otherwise required by the comprehensive land use plan and the zoning ordinance. Can we remove all of the particular impacts? No, we can't do that. But can we minimize them with buffers and plantings? Yes, we try.
Okay. Last question I have really is, and this is more for me to understand, that when we deal with senior adult living, we said already this is 55, right? Are these units being bought, or are they based off of like incomes of what people have? How's that working?
Well, they're rental units, so they're not condos.
Rental units,
They
okay.
will not be ownership. They'll be professionally managed and rented.
Okay, thank you.
I'm so old.
Okay. All right. So this is 55 plus senior living. Is this planned to be an assisted living facility or just an apartment building for 55 plus?
It's independent living, so not assisted.
Do we have an idea what the rents are going to be?
Yes.
What is that?
So the building will be 1 bedrooms and 2 bedrooms. So the 1 bedrooms will be around $1,350. Obviously, we have ways to go with market studies and some time, right? But the 2 bedrooms are around $1,650.
And what is the comparative in buildings A? And I know this is not really relevant to our decision today, but the buildings, the apartments in A and B, what is are they the same sizes, and what's the rent going to be there?
Those would be different sizes because they are general occupancy. So we would have larger units as well, 2s, 3s, and 4s. And the rents would start around $1,200 to about $1,800.
Okay. And again, this is different, but than what we're generally talking about here. But how does that compare to the market rate in the area?
I think it's comparable. I think it's comparable.
The management on site that you discussed, the staff people, was that just for the senior living facility or for the property at large?
That would be the property at large.
Okay, so the 4 full-time is covering all 3 buildings.
Yes.
Okay. Um, would the applicants consent to a condition that the mature trees on the western border of the property shall be maintained for the neighbors behind them as part of the buffer?
We haven't engineered the site yet,
Okay.
but Tyler or Stacy, how close are we to knowing whether that's possible?
Well, I think conservation plan, we can certainly look closer at that and do it to the maximum extent that we can.
Mhm.
But we really need to do the grading and the engineering to really find out to what extent we can do that.
And I noticed that the width of the property between buildings A and B, and is that Quailwood behind there? What is that?
Jamestown.
Jamestown, thank you. And the width behind the building that we're concerned with is much different. There is a much larger buffer, and the buildings A and B are clustered towards the east of the property, so they're much farther away than the senior living facility. Is that a is this the final plan for the senior living facility for the building?
This is, I would consider this even pre-conceptual site plan layout. I mean, there's a lot of pieces as far as building distances between the buildings, location of parking spaces. That is all subject to our preliminary plan and concept plan approval. So no, this is a very illustrative site plan proposal.
So potentially, the final building for building C could look more like building A and B and be clustered farther away from the property line. Potentially.
Potentially, yes. This is just a proposed layout.
All right, the development itself will have playgrounds and fields and sidewalks. What is, and that's great, but how does it promote walkability in the town at large? How are people walking from this senior facility to this town hall on a Friday night for concerts?
Well, I think, Mr. Chair, you mentioned it in the prior proceeding. We have a sort of a townwide issue with walkability. But I've done a lot of projects within the town, and this one is actually one of the few that do allow opportunities for walkability to some of the adjoining facilities on US Route 301. And I think that that's actually a little unusual in our our driving centric community that we have here. Certainly, the issue of walkability is something that will take some time and effort for the local government to address. I know that the town council would like for the downtown area to be part of a Main Street Maryland program, and I've heard that they're working on those things. But in terms of walking from here to town hall, it's not something that somebody will do.
And if that's the case, the comprehensive plan, one of the goals is to, and it's one of the early ones, to promote walkability and sustainability, environmental. Goal number 2, new development areas will reflect the principles of walkability, sustainability, and environmental protection. That's even before, I don't know if these are in order of priority, anything about senior facilities. So explain to me how this special exception doesn't violate goal number 2 of the comprehensive plan.
I think when we look at those elements within the ordinance, we have to look at them with respect to the degree of ability, realistically, of an applicant to satisfy those requirements. I think, again, this particular project provides a lot more walkability opportunities than pretty much anything I've seen in the town of La Plata. Certainly a senior or any other resident can get out and walk the neighborhood and walk the area within the neighborhood, could walk to a couple of the more popular restaurants that we have along US Route 301. But again, I think, Mr. Chair, without the public infrastructure for walkability, we have to look at that element to the degree that we can reasonably achieve it.
And you've mentioned the access, what is the access that currently exists from this property to walk, say, down Oriole Lane next to the Pepsi facility onto 301 to go to Marie's or go to McDonald's?
You want to address that?
We are actually tying into the existing sidewalk on Oriole Lane and Magnolia Drive. So currently, you could come out on Oriole Lane and go towards 301. Unfortunately, I'm not sure. Is there a sidewalk along 301 out there? There isn't. Okay. So we are tying into the sidewalk along Oriole Lane and the walkability through the adjoining neighborhoods down Magnolia Drive. So there is connections being made to the adjoining community to enhance and improve the pedestrian circulation over and above what's already there.
It's the chairman's opinion that the comprehensive plan is not to be, I understand your position, Mr. Scott, that, this facility, this plot of land can only meet so much of it. It's my opinion that the comprehensive plan is put in place to prevent this kind of development at all. That is not my jurisdiction. We are only here to determine whether or not the statute would prevent a special exception to put a senior living facility on this piece of property. But that's the situation that we're in today. Because I agree I heard murmurs and there is no sidewalk on Route 301. Route 301 is not walkable. And it's certainly not safe to walk on.
Mr. Chair, if I could, I think, and I think you mentioned this in the prior proceeding. You've got a comprehensive plan document, which can actually even sometimes be a little contradictory. But remember that a comprehensive plan is policy. It's planning. It's planning. It's not law and it's not ordinances.
Correct.
And so the comprehensive plan. So planning director.
I just wanted to,
Okay.
so there's intermittent sidewalks along 301. As properties develop along 301, they are required to install sidewalks. So there is a sidewalk in front of the McDonald's, and then the property next door to it is being developed with a car wash. They will be providing additional sidewalks that lead further down to the Wills Group building. That has a potential for reuse, and then down to Marie's Diner, which has a small sidewalk in front of it. So a lot of the sidewalk development is as development occurs, it's piecemeal. So as more development comes in, that will be a full sidewalk along the frontage. We also have state highway that would be in charge of those sidewalks.
So, Ms. Director Harrington, if the stated goal of the town is to focus development on downtown La Plata, what is the downtown La Plata zone that is supposed to be the focus?
Central business zone.
And where is that on them? Can we go back to a map and show that for the record? There were several.
Not on the presentation documents. Okay. The central business zone essentially goes from the hospital area of the town down to kind of town hall. And then it goes down to a little bit before 301, and then it goes up to the county building and around. So it's kind of, that's the downtown core. What the comprehensive plan saying that the desire is to concentrate development in the downtown core. It does not prohibit development elsewhere. There are property rights associated with the different properties within the town.
And of course, the entity with the power to change any of that is not this board. That is the town council and the mayor.
Correct.
Thank you. Okay, so,
I think, Mr. Chair, if I may,
sir.
again, sort of dovetail that, that comment you just made. Again, remember the comprehensive land use plan is planning.
Yes,
It's general, it's not intended to be law. And actually, the zoning ordinance is the legal implementation of the comprehensive land use plan. So that is the way in which the mayor of town council have elected to implement the comprehensive land use plan.
correct. Sorry, I had, okay, so we mentioned covenants that will go with this property. Can someone describe for me generally what the covenants that will be, and these are, I guess, applied to the tenants and the management of the facility? If somebody can describe for the record what those covenants would be.
So the covenants are set forth in the town ordinance, and they're intended to restrict and regulate the 55 or over age restriction. And of course, those will be placed into the chain of title for the senior component of this project so that they run with the land.
Correct. And so that means that the senior apartments will be permanently designated as such and cannot be changed by the management company without some kind of legal action. Is that
That's correct. Yes. And we'd have to come back to the town. Just trying to think of how we would do that. We'd come back to the town and ask the town for a revision to the age restricted nature of this project, but I'm not sure. You know, obviously at that point, the town would have the discretion over that because they've approved the particular component of this project as age restricted. So you'd be subject to the zoning ordinance all over again.
So in other words, it would be 55 and older in perpetuity.
That's correct. That's the intent. Yes.
Madam Clerk, can we go back to the slide that showed the wider north-south view of the property with it was the satellite photo? I'm not sure which slide that was.
I'm sorry, Mr. Chair, was that in the original, the
It was in the
presentation?
it was in the PowerPoint presentation. This one. All right, so the Director Harrington, it's my understanding that when we look to the left of this photo where there's a baseball diamond, that area of woods over there was recently annexed by the town of La Plata. Is that correct?
That is correct.
Okay. And what is that currently zoned as?
NCX, Neighborhood Commercial Mixed Use Zone.
Okay. And to the right side, the large open area that is to the east of the railroad tracks, is that slated to be developed as part of the Pine Grove development?
That is correct.
Okay. And so this property is slated to be developed between the mixed-use facility to the west on Hawthorne Road and the already in construction Pine Grove development to the east. Is that correct?
That is correct.
All right. And it's Pine Grove is 4,000 units. Is that correct? Something like that?
3,170.
Okay. And that's already being built.
Correct.
Okay. And the property to the west on Hawthorne Road has been annexed, but nothing has been approved for construction there. Is that correct?
That is correct. And there is the proposal or there's a 5-year rule under the Charles County zoning. Since the zoning was significantly different than what it was zoned under the county, there would be a 5-year rule that they could not do anything on the property for 5 years unless a waiver was obtained by the county commissioners.
So the town of La Plata can't approve any development on there for 5 years unless the county commissioners approve it?
Correct.
Interesting. Okay. And so when we're talking about traffic pursuant to section 19152 GD5, we're talking about traffic nuisance. Well, I guess this should be for council. we're only looking at the property under question. Is that correct?
Correct.
Okay, and we're not looking at the property under question in relation to other developments that may or may not be going in around it.
Correct.
I don't have any further questions for any of these panelists. Do either of the other members of the board have any questions? Okay. Is there anything else from the applicant?
We have nothing further. We'd like to reserve the right to respond to comments or further questions.
Thank you.
Thank you.
At this time, I'd move into the record the written documents provided by the applicant. If hadn't already been done. And we will move to the public comment period. Again, Madam Clerk will put a timer on the screen for 3 minutes. It is 9:04 p.m. I want everyone who has a stake in this to be able to make a comment. I feel very strongly about that, so I will allow everybody to make a comment, but I will ask you, and I will enforce the time limit to 3 minutes. Madam Clerk, do we have folks online who want to make a comment?
No, Mr. Chair, no one registered ahead of time.
Okay. Number one on my list here who signed in to speak today is Stephen Hill.
Present.
Come forward to one of the microphones. Sorry, one moment.
Lightly tap it. There you go.
Madam Clerk, would you prefer I swear in the commenters?
If you would, Mr. Chair.
Thank you. All right, so Mr. Hill, please raise your right hand. Do you solemnly swear and or affirm under the penalties of perjury that any testimony you'll give will be the truth?
I do.
Thank you. Go ahead. And start the 3 minutes. There we go.
Yes, good evening, gentlemen. Stephen Hill, Hill. I am a town resident and the property owner of 105 Godspeed Court in La Plata, Maryland. And I just have a quick statement for the record. As a property owner that is directly affected by the proposed project, I'm opposed to the special exception and request the Town Board of Appeals reject the exception and to consider another residential zoned location where this project would be more appropriate and not adversely affect property owners. That's all I have. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Hill. Where is Godspeed Court? Are you one of the houses that are right behind the property?
Is a better map for my property.
Are you in the Jamestown neighborhood that's right there behind there?
Yes.
Okay. Thank you, sir. Next I have, I believe it's Lauren Ball. You're welcome. Butch Garner. Mr. Garner. Deanna McWilliams.
Hi.
Hi. Please raise your right hand. Do you swear or affirm under the penalties of perjury that the following testimony you'll give is the truth?
It is.
Please proceed.
All right, I am Mr. Hill's next door neighbor at 104 Godspeed Court. Our homes happen to be uniquely adversely impacted because we're directly behind the apartment building. So basically the parking lot would be in our backyard. I had submitted, so yeah. We are the two, he's at the end of the court and I'm the one just to the right of him. So I had also submitted something for the public record and a picture. When I bought my lot 20 years ago, there was an old dilapidated barn in the back. And the builder said, well, the barn's gonna have an accident, which I was kind of happy about because there were mattresses in it and I had a little baby at the time. So they carted it away. And then there was a lot of mud back there. So we put some seed down to have grass. Again, so we didn't have a mosquito problem, all that kind of stuff. But in any case, it's a grassy area there and has been for 20 years. It's, I would say, approximately 50 feet. So there is no existing vegetation directly behind my house that they could even propose to maintain. And let's say they did plant a buffer. What am I going to do in the 10, 15 or more years before that buffer matures? Already in the winter, I can see the lights from McDonald's because McDonald's is directly behind my house. So what's going to, and this parking lot is really going to be in my backyard. And you talk about it being senior and no offense, but in 2 more months, I would qualify to live in a place like that. And I still work and would plan on, working probably for the next 20 years. So just because it's designated senior doesn't mean these are old retired folks that are only going to go out and go to doctor's appointments.
Thank you. So your testimony is that the back of your property, there are no trees on your property. It's just your property line and then the woods that are potentially going to
Well,
be.
my property line, the field, right?
Mhm.
There are no existing woods right there, which extends back about 50 feet. So if they were going to keep try to keep as much of existing vegetation to maintain a 50-foot buffer, I don't have a buffer right now. I haven't needed it because there's trees beyond that. But all of those would be gone and I'd be looking at a 4-story apartment building with a parking lot that I'm certain is going to be lit up all night.
Thank you. And thank you, ma'am. And if I hadn't, and if I know she did, Ms. McWilliams did submit photos and some written testimony prior to the hearing, and move those into the record as well at this time. But you can stand down. Thank
All
you.
right, I'm done.
That's fine.
Thank you.
Thank you. Rebecca Turner. Ms. Turner. I. Marshall. Mr. or Mrs. Marshall. Perry Govicini. Come on forward. Okay. And ma'am, what's your name? Thank you. I was not going to get that right. All right, Ms. Govicini, please raise your right hand. Do you solemnly swear or affirm under the penalties of perjury that the statements you make will be the truth? Thank you. Go ahead.
We happen to have a unique situation as well. My husband and I are at the corner of Oriole and Magnolia. My concern is currently there's a 4-way stop sign and there's also students and children getting on buses there. We have an insurmountable amount of cars that speed through the stop sign, that just do the California stop, that just have no stopping ability. If the first group who has the senior living at the top of Quailwood, and our neighborhood is used as a cut through Quailwood to get to 301, we're going to have immense traffic that way. With this additional amount of people coming in, and as my neighbor stated, 55 and older does not mean you get up at 9 o'clock to do your doctor's appointments and so on and so forth. These people have at least 7 to 8 more years before retirement, and that's not even in the picture. My other concern is I've been in HR for over 20 years. In regards to reference checks, we don't do them any longer. So in regards to the applicants or the people that they do for their due diligence, people lie. We have people that lie on their applications, from jobs to homes. So I really have a concern for all the above. The traffic from both items that you discussed this evening, as well as what type of preventions will they be putting in place for those people that they will be renting these places to? And that would be it.
Thank
you.
Any questions? Thank you. You may step down. Anybody else online or in person who wishes to make a statement? Any other questions from the board?
You covered them all.
All right. Yes, sir. What's your name? Would you like to come forward and make a statement? Just, you said your first name is Dennis. Can you spell your last name for me? And are you a resident of La Plata?
Yes.
Perfect. Please raise your right hand. Mr. Janke, do you swear or affirm under the penalties of perjury that your testimony will be the truth? Thank you. Go ahead.
Oh, hold on, sir.
Oop, she got to turn on your microphone for you.
I was just noticing on the La Plata zoning map that you're saying that it's zoned commercial highway. But according to the map, it's zoned residential 10.
Which part of the map are you looking at?
La Plata zoning map.
Okay.
It's in the documents that were attached.
Yes, and there were some.
Anyway,
I understand. Go ahead. Sorry.
My main concern is the traffic. I live in Hawthorne Green retirement. And trying to get out of there to go north, you have to go up Magnolia. And a lot of times you just have to wait a long time to get onto Hawthorne Green or Hawthorne Road. And the same with going out on Oriole Lane to go south. The traffic can be really bad coming down 301. So I noticed on this map where this development is going to be is that they're going to have a hard time sometimes getting out of there, especially going on Magnolia and going north. But right now, a lot of times we have to go Oriole West. If we want to go north, we have to go Oriole West through Quailwood and go up Quailwood Drive there and then come east. And if we want to go west, it's probably the preferred way to go. So I just don't see adding all these people is going to be a problem sometimes, especially in the morning and the evening. Also, I noticed on the map that when they put this place in, that I don't know how much shrubbery and trees will be along the Oriole Lane, or if it's just going to be wide open and you walk down the sidewalk or drive down Oriole Lane to the 301 and look left, you're going to see cars in a parking lot and then a building in the distance. It's just wide open. And regarding walking to town hall, I'm a walker. And I've walked all over west of 301. But getting across 301, you know, you're taking your life into your hands. And if it's seniors, I don't think too many seniors are going to take a chance of trying to go across 301. And the traffic lights are pretty far away. Route 6 is pretty far from where this place is at. I would think most people would just drive. And there aren't any sidewalks. I mean, if you go south of Oriole Lane, there's no sidewalk. And the Pepsi plant doesn't have a sidewalk. The only place that does have a sidewalk, again, was mentioned was McDonald's. And if the car wash has one, that's the only sidewalks there if you want to go to Marie's. So that's about it. I didn't know what was owner or rental, but it was, I guess it's a rental apartment complex. And so that's it.
Thank you very much, sir. I appreciate it. All right.
Mr. Chair, if I may.
Yes.
The list of registration was closed when the public hearing started. However, there is one individual online who would like to speak.
I don't have any members of the board. I think we're fine with letting them speak. So please go ahead and bring them on.
Angel W.
Hi, good evening. I am a resident living on 1010 Magnolia Drive. So I am one of the residents who will be directly affected by this new development. And just as my other neighbors mentioned,
Oh, I'm sorry, Ms. Winters, I apologize because you're online. I forgot, but can you please, can you pause the time for her for one moment? Madam Clerk, can you raise your right hand?
it's raised.
Thank you. And do you solemnly swear and or affirm under the penalties of perjury that your testimony will be the truth?
Absolutely, yes.
Thank you. Go ahead.
Okay, so again, as a resident directly affected by the new development, I am in agreement with my other neighbors in objecting of the development of both the multifamily unit and the senior citizens development. I don't believe, or from what I've been hearing, in these testimonies, that there has not been enough studies done on how crime will be increased in this particular area with the coming of this new development. Also, it will create a nuisance and it will reduce privacy. So were there any provisions, or are there any provisions in place for the residents as far as providing some type of privacy?
Does that, I don't know if we're fielding questions, but is there any other statement that you wish to make?
No other statement. So that was my only statement, that I do object to the building of the facility, of both facilities behind our properties.
Thank you. I appreciate your input. All right. Anyone else, Madam Clerk?
No.
Okay, thank you. At this time, then I'll close the.
Mr. Chair.
Yes. Oh, I'm sorry, Mr. Scott, you did reserve for rebuttal. Do you have any rebuttal at this time?
Yes. Stacy. And maybe Jessica too. Thank you. If you don't mind. Just a couple things, Mr. Chair and board members. I think again, it's important to remember, and I know this is really a little confusing, but this project, of course, is in a CH zone and can be developed, and of course, most certainly at some point will be developed for some either intense commercial use or for a multifamily use. We think that this particular multifamily project, which includes a majority age-restricted component, actually is a proposal by this applicant to soften or to reduce the impacts on the community, as opposed to what could be done there without coming to this board. A couple things on the buffer yard. The buffer yard is a buffer yard B. I think, Stacy, if you could explain what that means.
Sure. The zoning ordinance puts provisions in place basically between zones of what they feel is an appropriate buffer yard between the two separate zones. So in this case, that would be a buffer yard type B. And in the zoning ordinance, these buffer yards dictate different widths. So we chose to do the 50-foot wide buffer yard, thinking that would be, more buffering for the adjoining community. But there's also options to do a 20-foot buffer yard or a 30-foot buffer yard. So we went with the 51 in this case. And for that 50-foot buffer yard, for every 100 feet in length, there's going to be planted 5 canopy trees, 7 understory trees, 30 shrubs, and 15 evergreen. So that's for every 100 feet in length. So it is a pretty substantial buffer yard that will be provided, and per zoning, that's what they put in place and feel is an appropriate buffer yard between these two zones and these uses.
Also, Mr. Chair, going back to a prior point that you made, certainly the applicant can agree to use its best efforts to endeavor to maintain any mature trees that exist within that buffer yard. Bearing in mind that the site has not been engineered yet, and we certainly don't know exactly what the requirements for clearing and grading will be. But certainly we can endeavor to use our best efforts to maintain those existing trees. The there was a comment made that, people lie on their applications. I think that, what we're finding, and I think Jessica can attest to this, is in the electronic world, it's become a lot easier to check on these folks, to access information, to do background checks, to find people. And Jessica, I don't know if you want to emphasize that.
So we do use a service to do that when we're not doing this in our office. So we do use a third-party service that does check, court cases and background checks, criminal histories. Our landlord reference program is actually very successful. I mean, I will attest as well that our HR department does not give out references either because there are a lot of legal repercussions to doing so. But to my knowledge, there aren't any repercussions to landlords telling us that people didn't pay their rent or they were noisy. And I could tell you that they do constantly because we turn down people a lot for poor landlord references. So I do believe we have a system, and granted, no system is foolproof. But I think we work very hard to try to understand the quality of our residents.
And of course, there was a comment made about the lifestyle of seniors. Obviously, a lot of seniors continue to work. You're looking at one, I'm sorry to say. And I haven't gotten to the point of retiring and not doing anything yet. But yeah, we never said that these seniors were sitting home and not leaving the house. Certainly they are active. Some of them will be more active than others, but our impacts, and particularly with respect to traffic, were based upon data that is used nationwide in these particular situations, based upon actual studies that are done by the Traffic Institute. I won't get that wrong, I'm sure. Institute for Traffic. Yeah, them.
And on the age, I would just like to offer too that even though our low end is 55 plus, that is not who our resident typically is in our 55 plus communities. In the mid 70s, early to mid 70s is actually our primary resident median age. So we do not house a lot of, I'll say, younger seniors typically.
And I think that with that, without belaboring the point, we'll just indicate that we believe that we've carried our burden here and that we've established compliance with the elements necessary for the approval of this special exception, and we would respectfully request approval.
Thank you.
Thank you.
I do have one last question. I don't think anybody actually specifically pointed this out. The oval shapes with the white hash marks in it, those are the stormwater management ponds, correct? Conceptual, but they are currently conceived to be outside of that 50-foot buffer, which is there. Okay. So, all right. So the Board of Appeals is a very specific function. We are here for a special exception pursuant to Town Code 191-52G. The Board of Appeals shall not grant any special exception unless it finds from the evidence of the record that A, the proposed use does not violate or adversely affect the Town of La Plata Comprehensive Plan, this chapter, or any other applicable law. I'll open the first fact. I'm just going to proceed through the factors and open them up to discussion as we go. So does any member of the board have any discussion for A? No? Burrs? So I think based on the limited scope of what the Board of Appeals is allowed to look at, the proposed use of this land as a senior or a 55 plus community, that alone does not violate or adversely affect the Town of La Plata Comprehensive Plan. There are other issues with development that are not before this board and may not ever be before this board with this specific property. But as far as this apartment building, whether or not it's built as we see it today, being a 55 plus community does not violate, in my opinion, the comprehensive plan. B, the tract shall be suitable for the development proposed. Suitability of the tract shall be determined by reference to the La Plata Comprehensive Plan, size, topography, and other physical features of the tract. Accessibility to the tract to services, facilities required by the use, and other information is reasonably deemed necessary. open up this one for discussion to the board. Mr. Burris, do you have anything?
I have some, but it's not to that.
Okay, Mr. Thorne. My concern with this is that the applicant has testified that they have not done a topographical or any other engineering on this property to determine what is, we have a general statement that it slopes away from 301, but it does not. We don't have any evidence on the record at this time that I can see that talks about whether or not this is topographically proper for this location. We'll come back to that. Otherwise, I think in the zoning and et cetera, this is on commercial highway. Certainly they're permitted this development there. C is the proposed use will satisfy all the use standards set forth in subsection H. That's subsection H, I believe 28. And I believe it does. Is there any discussion from the board? And then D, that the proposed use of the location will not adversely affect the health and safety of residents or workers in the area. I don't think that the use as a 55+ facility causes any health or safety hazards to residents or workers as is. Is there any discussion from the board?
No.
Okay. D2, overburden existing and planned public facilities. Is there any discussion from the board? Is there any, this for D2, overburden existing and planned public facilities?
No.
No. Mr. Thorne, I think that the fact that this property has already been, it's already connected, I guess, to the water and sewer indicates that. D3 is be detrimental to the use or development of adjacent properties or the neighborhood. Is there any discussion from the board? Yes, I think we have some. Mr. Burris.
I have just. Sorry, just real quick question here is the documents we have, this is all in reference to just a special exception on the senior adult. Is that correct?
That's correct.
Okay, so based off the documents that are submitted here, okay, this is land use 220 multifamily housing, right?
Well, yes.
Yes. What's throwing me off is something you guys said, but let me read this here to you. This is for low rise. Low rise multifamily housing includes apartments, townhouses, and condominiums located within the same building with at least 3 other dwelling units and that have 2 or 3 floors. And you guys have just sold us is 4. Is that correct?
Yes.
Yes.
So then this doesn't fall under 220.
Which section?
First paragraph. Yeah. Part of their appendix.
Great.
Walk apartment typically has 2 or 3 floors in height.
We're talking 4 floors plus the roof line.
Correct. Well, right. And so I think there is some concern definitely about the size of the buildings and the impact that would have on the residential properties behind. Is that fair to say? For both, and as with me as well. So I don't think there's going to be any real impact to the commercial buildings on the 301 side of this. I don't think that
I don't think Pepsi cares.
I don't think, although residents might care having to get stuck behind the Pepsi trucks, but so there's that issue. I think the main thing here with 191.52G D3 is detrimental to the use of adjacent properties. And I haven't heard a whole lot of testimony about specifically that. We have heard a lot of concern about the light from the facility. And although the testimony is that the lights are designed not to aim at the neighboring properties, and that there will be buffers installed. And we have, I think, the most moving testimony from, was regarding, these properties that have, they don't have any trees in their own property. They have a lawn, and the woods behind them will be ostensibly removed with the construction of this facility. So that causes I think all three members of the board, some concern about that. D4 has changed the character of the neighborhood in which the use is proposed, considering services currently provided, population density, character, and number of similar uses. I think this changed the character of the neighborhood. I'm not sure how to interpret this one, because right now this is woods. So any development will change the nature of or the character of the neighborhood here, because the Jamestown development and others there currently have a significant buffer between themselves and the 301 corridor, notwithstanding the fact that this property is allowed to be developed. That is a significant change of character from nothing to medium density housing. Although there are other concerns with, there are other issues, but, and so with regard to our jurisdiction, with regard to whether or not that apartment building is a senior facility or not, I don't think that it would, if this was already built, change anything if it was a senior facility versus not a senior facility. And I think that is the only thing that this board is really allowed to consider. If we are not considering whether or not this should be built at all, only whether or not it should be a senior facility. So I don't think that there is any difference between it being a senior facility or a general multifamily dwelling. And in fact, I do believe that a senior facility probably have less impact. My concern is more with the size and the shape of the building being much larger than the other two, and being detrimental to the use or development of adjacent properties. Is there any other discussion on D4? Mr. Thorne.
Well, just one quick statement. You eloquently continue to emphasize that if we do not approve this, we can put something else there. That raises a flag to me. I'm not sure exactly what I'm trying to remember from all of the readings, but for some reason, I'm just getting a red flag. I have no other way to describe it.
I think the issue is that this property is owned by somebody.
Yeah.
And somebody's going to want to develop it. And what it gets developed into is up to the planning commission, the planning department, and the property owner, and isn't necessarily up to us. And that's the problem. Well, I understand what you're saying. I think sometimes when lawyers talk, we can sound more threatening than we mean to when we say, well, this is the alternative. But I understand because I heard it too. But that just means that, in my opinion, that this, again, well, I've already stated my opinion about it, but I'm not sure how appropriate that is. But I think that our job is to determine whether or not this building being a senior facility or not is appropriate. But
May I ask a clarifying question about the definition or the use number for multifamily? You said 220?
this was in,
Yeah.
so, yeah.
This is
I'll
the
let Mr.
landmark
Burris.
traffic consultant that Nick did on page 719. This is what was submitted to us, and that's.
Oh, under the ITE probably.
Yeah.
It's on the ITE.
Yes.
So that it would default to the town code, which is use number 5. And our definition for a multifamily dwelling is a structure containing 3 or more dwellings. The term multifamily dwelling shall include cooperative apartments, condominiums, other than townhouse condominiums, apartments, and the like. And it goes on to regardless of how rental units are equipped, but it doesn't state anything about the height. And the height limitations are set under the commercial highway zone by use type. And it allows up to 65 feet or I think 50 feet. But it allows up to a certain height. So that's where that would come into play.
All right, so then the wording is different than
The town
what
code.
we're saying
Right.
here, right? So, because here it's saying at least 3 other dwellings, they're saying 3 dwellings or more.
Correct.
Okay.
Okay, so this
Just
is,
a
this is
different-
an example that they use for the traffic study,
Correct.
not our actual zoning code.
Correct.
So, and then, D5 is, constitute a nuisance because of noise, traffic, number of people, or type of physical activity. So this is where, again, I think everything comes to a head when we're dealing with new development, especially around here. There is no way that, any new development is not going to have a negative impact on traffic. There's just no way. However, that's not the Board of Appeals' job to discuss. Basically, what we have to determine is whether or not this facility, being a senior 55 plus community, in that aspect of it, is going to constitute a nuisance because of noise, traffic, number of people, and et cetera. The testimony has been that it won't, and it will actually be less than if it was just a general multifamily dwelling unit. I do take to heart the testimony that, hey, just because they're 55 doesn't mean they're not working. I know lawyers like to work until we work our way into the box, basically. Hopefully not, but but I also take to heart the testimony from the applicant that the average age of the people in their 55 plus is in the 70s. And averages are great. We don't know what this place isn't built yet. We don't know what it's going to look like yet. But I think, again, there's going to be an impact. Is it a nuisance? Frankly, traffic is already a nuisance in this area. You can't get anywhere. We got certain times a day without getting stuck in it. And I just open up number 5 to discussion from the board. Does anybody else have any discussion they want about this one?
It's for traffic, right?
Yes.
The only thing I think is, that I think Nick alluded to, this wasn't a final number based off of what it is. And then something needs to be added in that if those numbers come back, the final numbers come back and they require to come back through here, it needs to, because the planning board doesn't have a traffic requirement in it. Is that correct?
For a special exception, they don't.
Right.
But it's my understanding that when this overall development is going to have enough daily trips to trigger it having to do a traffic study.
And that's what one is.
And that's when they go through, yeah, that is through the planning, but that is outside of our jurisdiction, is my understanding. And I don't know whether or not that'll come back to us. We could end up with an appeal from something, but so I think at this time, it is my recommendation that we approve the special exception for the use of this based on everything. But I would add under 191-52G2, 2 conditions, 2 other requirements. First is what was proposed by the applicant, which was that for the senior component, if there is any issue with traffic and et cetera, that mitigation measures would be required. Mr. Scott, what was the specific language that you proposed?
So we proposed to do a traffic impact study for the age-restricted component and to provide mitigation based upon the Charles County's ordinance, if deemed necessary, based upon that traffic study of the age-restricted component.
And will that study include would that be included with the overall traffic study with the rest of the property?
The overall traffic study with the rest of the property would be dealt with.
Yeah. Okay.
Under the other town policies. Yes.
So I think that first condition would be that the applicant conduct that traffic assessment, determine if it's necessary, and be required at this time to provide any mitigation to traffic. Do you have any discussion on that idea?
No.
Agreed.
Okay, can I have a second on my motion to add that condition?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Second, I would propose the condition that, again, I know this is a proposed site plan. Let me rephrase this. I'm gonna propose two more conditions. One, that the buffer between the west side, the buffer on the west side of the property, be the 50-foot buffer, which I know is not necessarily the required buffer, but we're going to require it as a condition. Do you have any discussion of that?
No.
All right, have a second.
Second.
Thank you. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. And third, I would propose that we require the developer within that buffer to minimize the impact on existing vegetation and mature trees, with the intention that if possible, it is left untouched. Do I have any discussion of that proposal?
No, I agree.
Okay. So I move to add that condition as well. Have a second.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. All right, so at this time, then I would move that the board approve the request for special exception pursuant to Town Code 191-52G 1 and 2 with those three special conditions. Is there any discussion?
Reluctantly.
Well, there's only so much we can do. Is there a second?
Second.
Thank you. All in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Okay, we carries. All right, so again, we'll grant the special exception based on those conditions. The town attorney will draft up an order. I'll be signing that within the next few days. And again, this is I ask certain questions because I want everybody to understand what the role of this board is. The role of this board is whether or not we grant these special exceptions, not whether or not the developments get made. That's not it's not in our power. And as I believe counsel for the previous applicant rightly noted, we cannot act arbitrarily and capriciously because then the applicant will appeal it and the circuit court will find that we did that and reverse our decision anyway. So we have determined based on the evidence provided and the testimony from everyone that the applicant did meet their requirement for the special exception, which is only about whether or not this property can be used as a senior living facility. I'll thank everybody for their participation and look forward to next time.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
And hopefully you won't have to come back to us because.
Oh yeah, at this time I will formally close the meeting. I don't believe there is any other business. Is there any other business, Madam Clerk? No?
No, Mr. Chair.
Thank you. So at this time I would adjourn. It is 9:46. Thank you.